South America. 12 countries. Really? Just 12? Oh, okay. 12 countries. None of which I've been to. It's very far away. But luckily, with the power of video games, I don't need to buy a ticket or sit through a 12-hour flight. So join me as I attempt to visit every single country in South America using video games. Oh, and I'm also doing Antarctica. If you'd asked me where the split between North and South America is, I probably would have put it here, around Guatemala. But nope. Apparently it's all the way down here, right at the bottom of the Central America land bridge. So that's what we'll be looking at in today's video. North America, Central America and the Caribbean will have to wait for another time. I'm only looking at the mainland and not including any of the islands because there's literally thousands of them and I've got to draw the line somewhere. I'm only looking at independent countries, with the one exception being French Guiana, mainly because I didn't want a gap on my map, and also because I already have a game in mind for that one. Just like in my European video, which you should definitely watch if you haven't already, I'm attempting to use my own personal collection of video games on various consoles, but just like last time, I'm only allowed to use each game once. But seeing how this is a new continent, I'm allowed to use games that I used in the previous video, although I doubt there'll be much crossover. One thing I learned after posting my last video is that it is impossible to draw a map of the world that makes everyone happy. I know literally nothing about South American politics, so if this map offends you, or I've missed out any non-official countries, all I can do is apologise. And with that said, let's begin the challenge. I got quite a bit of criticism last time for my overuse of Call of Duty games, but don't worry, there'll be a lot less Call of Duty in this video. Call of Duty Ghosts is a game that's set mostly in South America. You get to visit countries such as Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela. I'm just kidding, we're doing Brazil first. Brazil has more games set in it than any other country in South America, probably because it's the largest, has by far the biggest population, and is visited by the most tourists. Most games set in Brazil head straight to Rio de Janeiro with its famous Sugarloaf Mountain, Christ the Redeemer statue, and Copacabana Beach. But for my pick for Brazil, we're heading for Sao Paulo with Max Payne 3. Maxwell Payne is having a bit of a midlife crisis, and like a lot of men his age, he's moved abroad to start a new job, trying out a new haircut, murdering thousands of people, and starts wearing Hawaiian shirts. He's been hired as a bodyguard by the Broncos, the most kidnapped family in all of Latin America. He must bullet time and sideways jump through various levels, gunning down many enemies to try and keep the family safe. Sao Paulo is a city where the massive gap between its poorest and richest citizens is clear and obvious to see. And that becomes a running theme in this game. I'm not going to analyse every single level in this game, because we'd be here all day, and there are many more countries to visit. So let's take a quick look at 3 of them. In an early level in the game, we head to an elite nightclub, where celebrities and the city's wealthiest citizens like to hang out. The place oozes with money and luxury. A quick Google search and I found many exclusive nightclubs all over the centre of the city, including one with a helipad just like we see in the game. Turns out this is the preferred mode of transport for the rich and famous around this city, as the traffic is terrible, and biker gangs roam the streets looking for easy targets to rob. The main reason I chose this level is because a lot of it takes place on the roof, and I wanted to get a good look at Max Payne's 3 version of the city. Sao Paulo is the 4th largest city in the world, and there's a massive sprawling mass of rather bland and generic looking high-rise buildings, and that's very much what we see in the game. I was able to spot one of the main landmarks of the city, the Ibirapuera Park. I'm sure I pronounced that very badly. I didn't study Portuguese or Spanish, so I'm sure I'm going to butcher a lot of these place names throughout this video. This is the city's largest green space, and the purple tower thing is a giant monolith sculpture that sits in the park. And those strange looking green wispy things down there, that's a rather extravagant fountain. Unfortunately they're not animated, but it's still a cool detail. We leave the city momentarily, in the mission Alive but Not Exactly Well, where we take a boat trip down the Tietê River. We're north of the city, and are deep in the dense thick jungle. The river does have sections exactly like we see here, with multiple tributaries and small islands, making a watery maze in the middle of the jungle. During the mission we also see a lot of buildings and shacks, as we make our way along the river. This is quite accurate to what we'll see in real life, as the river was and still is used for transportation, especially in the mining and farming industries. It was a lot easier just to use barges in the river, rather than construct new roads through the thick jungle. And so, just like in real life, we'll see many buildings for refueling and maintaining boats, and piers for unloading and loading goods. Our final stop at Max Payne 3 is in the favelas. In the level, here I was again, halfway down the world. We take a trip to Nova Esperanza Favela, which isn't a real place, which is based on one of the larger of the estimated 1,600 favelas you'll find in the city. Many games have levels set in favelas, but in most cases it just uses an empty backdrop. Max Payne 3 remembers that this is a place where people actually live and work. About a third of Sao Paulo citizens live in favelas just like this, and here we can see NPCs going to street parties, kids playing football in the streets, and just generally living out their lives. Each shack is completely different. Most of them are made out of bricks, and many others are just thrown together with whatever materials they could find. Sheet metal, discarded wood, tarpaulins. It really is also incredibly detailed. We also see poorly connected electricity cables running all over the place in between the houses, and large water containers on the roofs. Rockstar really do put a lot of thought when it comes to designing their levels, and always do a ton of research. So well done, very accurate representation of Brazil. I can't recommend this game enough. It's constantly jumping between gritty thriller and over-the-top action movie. The in-game physics engine makes leaping around so much fun, and the enemies will realistically react to your gunshots. That never gets old. Rockstar, of course, is most famous for the Grand Theft Auto series, but this game truly is one of their other classics. Now on to Venezuela, and one game I couldn't wait to talk about. Mercenaries 2 World in Flames. In this game you play as one of 3 mercenaries, where you have to blow things up. You then unlock bigger explosions. Then you can blow things up again, but even bigger this time. And then you unlock even bigger explosions, all the way until you can unlock a nuclear weapon. There's also something going on with a dictator or something. The Americans and Chinese are also there. But mainly explosions. I played this game so much when I was younger, but I never stopped to think about how accurate it actually is. This game takes place across the whole of Venezuela. Well, a very shrunken down version of it anyway, but it turns out they've done a pretty decent job of it. You can find many of the country's famous landmarks, including Lake Maracaibo, Caracas, the capital city, and Angel Falls. The game's version of Lake Maracaibo has this bridge, which is a pretty accurate recreation of a real-life bridge that goes over the lake, although it has been shrunk down a lot, as the real-life one is absolutely massive. When we head to Caracas, we can spot a few of the city's famous buildings, including the Palace of Justice, and the Twin Towers and sloped roof building of the Central Park complex, although they are lacking a bit of detail. The general look of the everyday houses also look pretty accurate to what you'll see in Venezuela, both in Caracas and the other smaller towns which are dotted around the map, which are all roughly based on real places, but most of the smaller towns lack any real landmarks. We can also find Angel Falls in the southeastern corner of the map, near the border with Guyana. This is the world's tallest waterfall, but to be honest, the game really doesn't do it justice. It's nowhere near tall enough, and the one in real life is one continuous drop, and not a series of shorter ones like we see in the game. Another downside is the lack of biomes in this game. We see quite a lot of jungle, but it's far too open and not dense enough. Obviously this is for gameplay and performance reasons, and we see a few areas of grassland, but that's about it. But the game does do a good job at showing the country's industries. We can find a large open pit mine. Most importantly, we can find lots of oil industry. Venezuela actually has the world's largest oil reserves, with the biggest oil field being on the east shore of Lake Maracaibo, and it's also in this exact location on the game's map. So overall, Mercenaries 2 does a pretty good job at Venezuela. We all have those games that deep down we know aren't the greatest in the world and are slightly janky, but still we absolutely love them and can't stop playing them. And for me, that was this game for a huge period of time. It's actually where my YouTube story began, as many of my early videos were stun montages in this game. Unfortunately, you won't find them on my channel anymore, because I was a complete idiot and used licensed music, and I picked up a ton of copyright notices when that became a thing on YouTube, so those videos had to go. So maybe I'm slightly biased, but yeah, this game is crazy fun, even if the quality isn't the best. Now we make our way to Peru. An honourable mention has to go out to the original Tomb Raider, as the first time we met Lara Croft was in Peru, as she makes her way through a very blocky version of the Andes to discover a lost world filled with non-avian dinosaurs. As cool as this is, it's a load of nonsense. So my pick for Peru was the PlayStation 2 game James Bond 007, Everything or Nothing. A huge part of the game takes place in Peru, when old Jimmy B gets up to all sorts of mischief. He drives an invisible SUV, infiltrates a mine, gets yelled at by Willem Dafoe, base jumps, goes on a tank rampage, rides around on a motorcycle, sneaks into a hotel, takes part in a rally race, comforts a grieving geologist, rides a motorcycle again, goes to the dentist, and blows up a platinum mine. Yep, all in a day's work with your average MI6 agent. This all takes place in the coastal town of Puerto Viejo. So how does the game version compare to the real life one? Well, there's one in Costa Rica, and a beach called Puerto Viejo, but no actual town in Peru. Well, maybe there used to be one, but after James Bond and his Elite Assistance tank rampage, it no longer exists. So it's got to be based on somewhere. I started looking at the towns and landmarks, beginning with the church, and I found the exact one in real life that the level designers must have used as a reference. The San Pedro, I approve of this name, church, in Andahuaylas. It looks almost identical. This is a very famous church in Peru, due to its highly decorative interior, which gives the church the nickname of the Sistine Chapel of South America. But we don't get to go inside it in the game. What about this very distinctive archway with a clock tower? Well, I found a match for this one as well, but it wasn't in Peru. It was in Antigua in Guatemala. So not only is that the wrong country, it's the wrong continent. There are arches with clocks in Peru, but they're a lot more robust and look completely different to this one. The overall look of the town is definitely based on Cusco. This is a very historic city in the middle of Peru. It may not be by the ocean, but it's full of whitewashed buildings, terracotta roof tiles, with archways all over the place. So I think was the dev's main inspiration. As we drive around the coastline in this game, we see lots of jungle, but this is actually quite inaccurate, as most of Peru's coastline is actually desert, so there's way too much green. Peru's most famous landmark has to be the ruins at Machu Picchu, and no game set in Peru is complete without some Inca ruins, and we find some in this game. And it has to be said they've done a pretty good job. A lot of the ruins left today are just short stone walls, with these triangular structures at the sides, which obviously used to hold a pitched roof, which has long since disappeared. The main central tower didn't match anything I saw in real life, and neither do these stone pillars, which we could find in the town. Hey, show some respect to your country's heritage. Those could have gone in the British Museum. The whole reason we're in Peru in the first place is because the bad guys here mining platinum. So surely the devs did some sort of research and found out Peru had loads of platinum reserves, which is why they based the game here. Well, apparently no. There are no significant platinum reserves in Peru at all. Gold, yes, copper, but no platinum. So why they chose Peru? I don't know. Paddington, maybe? Personally, this is one of my favourite James Bond games out there. It's very action-packed and full of gadgets and vehicles. In fact, it feels like they wanted to build a vehicle combat game, and then thought, oh crap, we need to add in some more foot sections as well. The controls and shooting gameplay aren't the best, but it's still a fine game. They even managed to get the movie cast in here as well, even though it's a completely original story. Definitely worth a playthrough if you're a big James Bond fan. We head down the coast to the world's skinniest country, Chile. I only had a couple of games set in this country, one being SSX, which takes place high up in the Andes, on Fitzroy Mountain, which straddles the Chile-Argentina border. The peaks here are very narrow, just like in real life, but I seriously doubt there's this many plane wrecks up there. Because this game's going to help me out later on, I decided instead to talk about Hitman Blood Money. In the other game mission, A Vintage Year, we head to a vineyard, deep in the Chilean tropical rainforest. It really is a beautiful location. We see a pretty standard colonial mansion, which you'll find all over South America, but there's nothing really distinctive Chilean about it. It sits in a ravine, surrounded by tropical rainforest, and a gorgeous view of this giant waterfall. Pretty spectacular, but there's some serious issues here. First of all, this is a vineyard. Where are the vines and grapes? Wine grapes need a lot of sunshine to grow properly, and we ain't going to get much sunlight down in this ravine. And also, you're not going to be growing much in the middle of a tropical rainforest either. It's way too wet. There are a lot of wine regions around Chile, but of course they look nothing like this. Okay, so I know this whole winemaking thing is actually a front for a cocaine factory, but if the feds ever come knocking, they're going to see right through this terrible facade when they realise they're not actually growing any grapes here. Sure, maybe they're transporting them in. But where? 47 has infiltrated his way in here on a pensioner's coach trip. Where's the coach? Where's even the road in? This level really doesn't make any sense. The plant life indicates that this level takes place in the tropical rainforest of the Amazon, but you won't find any tropical rainforest like this in the country. It's too far south. There are a few small patches of subtropical rainforest, but the vast majority of forest in Chile is temperate rainforest, which looks nothing like this. But a lot of Chile is either desert or mountain. Well, I think the level designers just wanted to go for a generic South American jungle look, but really didn't do a lot of research into picking a country. Ecuador, Bolivia or Peru would have been a better choice for a setting, based on what we can see in this level. With all that said, Hitman Blood Money is a very good game, and laid the foundations for the modern Hitman games. Despite the setting, it's probably one of the least interesting missions in the game. There aren't a lot of creative ways to take down your targets. I just resorted to basic strangulation, and quietly shooting someone in the back of the head. But a lot of the later missions have a lot more creative ways to assassinate your targets. There are a lot more levels compared to the modern Hitman games, but they're also a lot smaller. But still, I think it's the best Hitman game out of the older classics. We cross the mountains and head into Argentina. There were a few games I could have picked for this one. Oh look, it's Hitman again. This time in 2021's Hitman 3. And we find ourselves in yet another vineyard, but they've done a much better and more realistic representation of what a South American vineyard should look like. We have nice, smooth, gentle rolling hills, covered in grapevines. But because we've only literally just done a Hitman game, let's go for something else. Turns out all my other Argentinian games were rally games, but in the end, I didn't go for any of these games either, and decided to buy a whole new one. Dakar 18. This isn't your standard World Rally Championship game. You need to navigate using headings on a compass, and your notebook, which are these cryptic doodles down here that explain to you what you need to be looking out for, and where you should be heading to reach your checkpoints. And there's a lot of checkpoints. Some of these races go on for like 30-40 minutes, so if you're playing, make sure you're sitting comfortably. This game takes place across 3 countries of South America, as we head through the Atacama Desert in Peru, the mountains of Bolivia, and then finally Argentina's dry, dusty interior. I was a huge fan of the 2022 game Dakar Desert Rally set in Saudi Arabia, and decided Dakar 18 would be perfect for this video. When a lot of us picture South America, I'm sure we picture jungles, and so do most video game designers apparently. But this game takes us to the interior of Argentina, a massive empty wilderness of hills, rocks, dust, and dried up riverbeds. And that's exactly what we see in this game. They've done an excellent job of recreating this region, especially judging by the photos I looked at of the Rio 2018 Dakar Rally that took place here. The races take place across massive distances in this game, making you feel like you're in the middle of the wilderness, and do a great job of capturing the sheer scale of this place. Occasionally you will come across some civilization, with the odd house or farm building, and these do seem to be pretty faithful recreations of basic buildings you'll find in this region. So yeah, a great representation of this region of Argentina. I really wanted to like this game, but it committed one of the biggest sins in gaming. It just doesn't respect your time. Some of the races go on for 30 or 45 minutes. You can stop the race, and when you log back in later, you can set off from where you were, which is good. The game's biggest issue is time penalties. I mostly rode a bike whilst I was playing this game, because I wasn't getting on with the off-road handling of the cars. I just really didn't like going downhill for some reason. And also, I couldn't stand the voice of the dude reading out pace notes. He also sounded very angry. I was having traumatic flashbacks to when I was learning to drive. Ugh! Anyway, if you go over a jump, one of three things will happen. 90% of the time you'll land gracefully, then 5% of the time you'll just instantly fall off and have to go back to your previous checkpoint. Then the final 5% you'll crash, ragdoll off your bike, and completely wreck the thing. And if you want to continue the race you have to repair it, which means time penalties. You can reset to the previous checkpoint, but again, more time penalties, and your bike will still be broken. Also, there are parts of the race where you have to slow down and obey a speed limit, and if you speed just a tiny bit, yep, that's right, more time penalties. Look, I know this is like a racing sim, and this is realistic to the real Dakar rally, but it's just so damn annoying. Sure, you could restart the rally, but by this point you could have already been riding for like 20 minutes. In the end, I just kind of gave up and didn't respect the speed limits just because I was so far behind already. Which is a shame. Maybe they need to make a racing mode for filthy casuals like me. They did in Dakar Desert Rally, which is why I like that game so much. But hey, maybe that's just me. This is definitely one for the hardcore racing fans out there. Up next we have Bolivia. And there really was only one game I had in mind for this one. That being Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. Never actually played this game before, but it had been on my radar for a very long time, and making this video finally gave me an excuse to play it. In Wildlands you play a group of wild mans who have some wild plans to take out some wild gangs, and their production of wild cocans. Okay, so that joke kind of broke somewhere in the middle. This game takes place over a huge part of Bolivia, but you won't be finding any large cities, as this game sticks to the more rural locations. Wildlands, if you will. With that said, you will find plenty of small towns and picturesque villages. I googled some of the names of these villages, and most of them don't actually exist. The ones that do are in completely the wrong place. I kind of think that Ubisoft just made up a bunch of Bolivian sounding names, and if any of them have to match real life locations, it was purely a coincidence. We can find some of Bolivia's most famous real life locations in this game's map. We can find the Unisalt Flat, which looks absolutely amazing in this game. This real life dried up lake is approximately 4,000 square miles and is the world's largest salt flat. On the edges of the lake we can find another famous location, the train graveyard. Here you'll find loads of rusting abandoned steam engines that were dumped here after they were no longer needed when mining deposits in the area started to run out. You'll also find a pink salt lake called Laguna Colorada, complete with large flocks of flamingos, for all you budding bird watchers. We can even find the infamous Road of Death, the world's most dangerous road, and it feels appropriately treacherous as you try and drive along it. What this game does especially well is depicting the massive range of biomes you'll find all over the country, ranging from Amazon rainforest, rocky mountain peaks, dry dusty desert, flooded swampland, and even pine forest, and basically everything in between, all beautifully blended together. I think this has to be one of the most accurate and diverse looks at South America we've seen so far. The buildings also change depending on which region you're in. In the rainforest you'll find shacks made out of wood with thatched roofs. Around the mountains you'll find plain stone buildings, and other larger urban areas you'll find brick houses, often painted in bright colours. And they're all very accurate to what you'll see in real life Bolivia. Say what you will about Ubisoft, they sure know how to build a detailed open world. And this game is no exception. There are so many different interiors you can enter, like this very detailed school I found. And the NPCs are also just going about their day, living out their lives, whether they're selling goods in a market or playing musical instruments in the street. A lot of them wearing outfits you'll see on the real life indigenous people of Bolivia, complete with bowler hats. It's a very Bolivian thing. Despite this absolutely gorgeous depiction of this country, the Bolivian government really weren't happy with this game. I'm not saying there is no drug trafficking or production in Bolivia, but the amount we've seen in the game is absolutely crazy, and I can see why they got so upset. I really enjoy playing this game. It's an amazing open world, and you're free to approach each mission however you want. Whether that's stealthy sneaking your way around and syncing up your shots to surprise the enemies, or going on raids using a helicopter, or armored truck with a minigun. These tactics will work with some missions, but not necessarily others, so it's up to you to figure out which one to go for. And I had a great time exploring this very detailed and varied open world. There were a couple of issues whilst playing this game though. The sky kept flickering for some reason, which was very annoying. And your AI squad mates are dumb as a bag of rocks. And sometimes had to be reminded that, yeah, we actually supposed to shoot the bad guys, or we'll all end up dead. But still, I enjoyed this game, and played it long after I was done gathering all the footage I needed for this video. You can count the number of games set in Ecuador on one hand. One of those is Battlefield Bad Company 2. In this game, Russia is yet again uncharacteristically invading countries that don't belong to them, which results in a world war between Russia and America. Both countries find themselves in South America, and this game's campaign takes you all over the continent, including the Andes, the Atacama Desert, and Ecuador. Towards the end of the campaign, you've acquired a component that is required for making a secret super weapon. You're on your way to safely deliver it when, oh dear, your helicopter gets shot down. You must then regroup with your squad and try to make your way out of the country. Things go to plan, you ride quad bikes, you get double crossed. Next thing you know, there's a huge battle going on in a city, where the secret weapon goes off, and you find yourself with a flight to catch. Things start off well with this game's representation of Ecuador. Ecuador sits on the equator, which is why it's called Ecuador. Ecuador, Equatoridor. See? And as a result, most of the country is covered in thick, luscious tropical rainforest. It sits on the westernmost edge of the Amazon basin, and so the green, lush jungle we find ourselves fighting through is very appropriate. We find ourselves going through various shacks and farmland, and the simple wooden structures are very much like what you'd see in real life. We also briefly see a church off in the distance, which is your standard, typical, colonial style of church, which we'll also see in this region. Later on in the mission, we're in a helicopter and we're flying through these ravines, and after looking at a quick terrain map of Ecuador, we can find plenty of small, narrow ravines. Of course, we have the obligatory South American waterfall. If your South American game doesn't have a waterfall in it, can you even call it South America? Well, to be fair, the continent does have some of the world's most beautiful and well-known waterfalls, so I'll ignore this cliche. We then head to a city which the Battlefield Wiki refers to as the Ecuadorian capital of Quito. Are you sure, Battlefield? Are you really sure? Quito is the Ecuadorian capital, a large city that sits inland, surrounded by tall green hills. It's a very old city, and we see a lot of traditional terracotta roof colonial buildings, and as a result there aren't a lot of high-rise buildings. So, let's see what the Quito looks like in Battlefield Bad Company 2. Oh my god, what the hell is this? First of all, there's the ocean, despite the fact the coast is a good 5-hour drive away from Quito. And look at those skyscrapers! There's absolutely nothing like that in Quito at all. Sure, I know this game is set in the near future, but come on, this is ridiculous. Also, we got this massive suspension bridge. Out of interest, I googled Quito suspension bridge and found this. Yeah, that's a big difference right there. Did anyone even bother to check to see what Quito looked like? Because I really don't think they did. Also, the mission starts off in a favela. This isn't really a word that's used in Ecuador. They prefer the term barrios, or colonias, to describe their unplanned settlements. And they're not quite the ramshackle affair, quickly thrown together shacks you'll see in Brazil. They tend to be a bit more well built. So yeah, this really is a game of two halves when it comes to accurately portraying Ecuador. Awful depictions of capital cities aside, this game was actually really fun. It goes for a much more B-movie action movie vibe, rather than the more serious and war movie tones of the game's standard entries. It sure is action packed, with set pieces and vehicle sections galore, and fully destructible environments, which is really fun. If you're a fan of first-person shooters and not giving this one a try, I highly recommend. But it definitely won't be winning any awards for its story, which has about as much depth as a saucer of milk. My map is filling up nicely as we head to Colombia, where we head to one of my favourite game franchises of all time. In a very early story mission in Uncharted 3, a flashback takes us to the city of Cartagena, where we learn how Nathan Drake meets Victor Sullivan. How Drakey met Sully, if you will. We start off in a naval museum, where we're trying to get our grubby urchin mitts on Sir Francis Drake's ring and cipher disk. We then see Tricky Vic acting a bit sus, and we tail him for a bit. He then gets a key cut. Oh, by the way, side note, this is total BS by the way. I used to work at a locksmith's cutting keys. There's no way you can take a blank key, wiggle it inside a lock for a few seconds, and then get a working key cut from this. That's always bugged me. Anyway, we tell him again, nab the key, and then go back and rob the museum. Unfortunately we get caught, and an exciting chase sequence begins. The worlds of Uncharted are really realistic, instead opting for a more overly saturated and stylized, almost fantasy version of its locations, and the in-game version of Cartagena is no different. The real-world city is full of old colonial buildings which are brightly coloured, with balconies adorning the buildings' facades, and Uncharted cranks us up to 11. The city does look absolutely gorgeous. It is very much a caricature version of the real-life city. I was going to say the buildings feel way too tall, but then I remembered we were playing as Nathan Drake as a kid in these levels, so of course everything is going to feel bigger than it does in real life. But can we spot any Cartagena landmarks? Well, interestingly enough, there is actually a naval museum in the city. The outside looks completely different, but photos of the interior look a lot like the ones we see in the game. One of the main landmarks we pass by is the statue in a plaza. I googled Cartagena statues and there's a lot of them, including St. Pedro, not me, Swordman, Dummy Thick Woman, and Man Crying in Shower, but I couldn't find any that looked like the one in the game. So I think it's entirely fictional. I thought maybe it could be Christopher Columbus, but it looks nothing like him, so maybe it's just some random conquistador. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments if you've seen this statue somewhere, because I couldn't find it anywhere. We can find another landmark, of some Peter Claver's left tower. I don't know where the rest of the church has gone. It's obviously based on this part of the church, but it's lacking its twin and this beautiful dome. All in all, it's a very beautiful version of Cartagena, and it's definitely going for looks over realism. The Uncharted series is amongst my favourites out of all video games. and my favourite really does change depending on what day of the week it is. Uncharted 3 feels like the most action-packed, with some absolutely unforgettable and iconic set pieces. But maybe the story isn't quite as good as Uncharted 2 or Uncharted 4, but still an absolutely amazing game. According to the internet, there's only one game set in Paraguay, and I just so happen to own it, Splinter Cell Blacklist. This game delivered me Slovakia in my Europe challenge, and now it's saving my ass once again by bringing me Paraguay. In the middle of the campaign, we head to a mansion to interrogate and then extract a high-value target to help prevent a future terrorist attack. Some special forces dudes show up, but lucky for us, they're the kind of special forces that have bright lights on their heads, so you can headshot them, even through smoke screens. We then escape on a boat. The mansion we see is your pretty generic modern mansion, for the kind of people who have more money than imagination. The mansion sits on the few parts of Paraguay where the jungle hasn't been completely destroyed and turned into a plantation. The only landmark we see is this bridge. I assumed it was just a dull generic concrete bridge, but it turns out it's based on one in real life. It's called the Friendship Bridge, and it sits right on the border between Paraguay and Brazil. Wholesome. And it is supposed to be this bridge, as this level takes place in Ciudad del Este, where the bridge sits in real life, although the area around it is a lot more built up, and not completely isolated like we see in the game. And I really hope that's not the ocean beyond it, as Paraguay is definitely landlocked. Seeing how it's at night, I'll give the level designers the benefit of the doubt, and just assume it's a very wide part of the Panara River, which the bridge crosses. Like I said in my European video, a lot of Splinter Cell purists absolutely hate this game. But I'm not a Splinter Cell purist, and it's fine. Not amazing, not terrible. A perfectly passable action stealth game. We now head to French Guiana, our only foreign territory on this list. Seeing how this isn't a real country, we're going to use Not a Real Game. Asphalt 8 Airborne, an over-the-top arcade racer, available on most mobile devices. I used to play this game a lot on my lunch breaks at a previous job, and thought it'd be cool to dust off my old tablet and see if I could play it after all these years. It didn't work, so I had to download it onto my phone. One map takes us to French Guiana, or more specifically, the Guyana Space Center, or European Spaceport. This is a really fun track. We're in the middle of the jungle, and we tear our way through the facility as a rocket launches, and space shuttles come into land. It's very awesome, but how accurate is it? Let's start off with a couple of good things. I'm not a rocket expert, but after some quick googling, I think this is an Arena 7 rocket, which are a kind of rocket you'll see launching in this facility. Around the track we pass these massive cargo planes, which again is pretty accurate. As the rockets are constructed in Europe, they're either shipped here or transported in these planes for final assembly at the facility. And we pass through a massive hangar where we can see the rockets being built. Obviously this is way too open. The launch site is also surprisingly accurate. We see the final assembly building where the rocket is hoisted upright. And all these metal towers are also there in real life. Now on to the bad. First of all these idiots in supercars are completely violating the minimum safe distance rule. This is a major health and safety violation. This place isn't just Cape Kennedy in the middle of a jungle, so we shouldn't see any space shuttles, as none ever launched or landed in French Guiana. The massive crawlers we see used to transport rockets, again, are only used in Cape Kennedy. Rockets are mainly transported using a rail system in French Guiana. The array of satellite dishes, or radio telescopes, are completely fictional, as you won't find a massive array like this in French Guiana. Also, the jungle is wrong. The area around the launch facility is more open, and the trees are less tropical than this. But judging by some of the details, I think some research was at least done by the track designers. They're definitely going for more of a rule of cool rather than realism. This game is super fun, but it's a mobile game, so yeah, you have all that usual crap of ads and constant pop-ups and buy this, buy this, buy this, spend money, spend money, spend money, which is a real shame. It was so close to being great. If this was put on console or PC without all this microtransaction nonsense, it would have been truly brilliant. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but just like in my European video, we've hit a major problem, as once again I found myself stuck with 3 countries with no game set in them. First up we have Uruguay. Allegedly there are 2 games set here, the first being Call of Duty Ghosts, but this turned out to be a complete lie. The second is Caves of Fear, but this game was never actually released, and I couldn't find anything on games set in Suriname or Guyana. Things got pretty desperate in my European video, and I think I said at the time I wasn't truly happy with the solutions I came up with to visit the last 3 countries. So let's try a change of tactics for these ones. One game that people kept mentioning in my last video was Microsoft Flight Simulator, but as I said in that video, I don't own a gaming PC or one of the new Xboxes, and I'm not going to buy a whole new console just so I can complete this stupid challenge. It's second hand, by the way. Hey, I'm not earning Mr. Beast levels of money on this channel, so I turned it on for the very first time. What's going on? What, the control needs batteries? The next day a battery pack arrived. I turned the console the right way round and figured out where the on button was. After signing up to Game Pass and searching for ages, I finally found the version of Microsoft Flight Simulator that would actually work on my console. Why it was so well hidden, I don't know. And it was straight to Uruguay I went. At first I had a massive panic attack. It was dark. There are so many controls, What the hell do I do? I thought I was in way over my head with this one. So I headed into the campaign, which lets you choose off your starting location. So Laguna de los Patos International it was.
Hello there. You must be foolish Pedro, right?
Hello there. Luckily for me, the controls nearly weren't as daunting as I first thought. Now flying was surprisingly easy. It basically feels the same as flying a plane in Grand Theft Auto 5. The controls and handling are very similar. And I was soon up and flying with confidence. Maybe too much confidence. But seriously, this game is incredible. Where have you been all my life, Microsoft Flight Simulator? You know I love games, and I love exploring the world, and I kind of feel like this game was meant for me. The tech put into building this world is really impressive. I know it mostly uses a combination of AI and data pulled from satellite photos and Bing Maps, but it's literally the whole world. I know the detail can get a bit janky up close, and it's more meant to be observed from a distance, rather than just flying meters above the ground. But it's still super impressive, and also means it's very realistic, and pretty much what you'll see in the real Uruguay. Obviously not every single building has been modelled, because that would be impossible. So the AI just plonks down a collection of generic buildings of suitable size and shape. But a lot of things are in the right place, like this wind farm. There really is a wind farm here. How did it know that? I explored a little bit more of Uruguay, including flying over this lake in a fighter jet, which went just about as well as suspected for a novice pilot like me. I then took a gentle flight down the coast to a real-life beauty spot called Punta del Diablo, and yeah, it looked very nice and tropical. I think this game might be a new obsession of mine. I think it's certainly going to prove to be an invaluable tool as this series continues. Hopefully I won't get bored of this too quickly and the novelty will wear off. Now, what do we do about Suriname? For this one, I wonder if there are any games out there set in the Amazon rainforest that don't specifically say which country they're set in. Step up the survival game, Green Hell. This is basically a modern day version of Tamagotchi. You check what your character needs on a small electronic device, except this time, the dumb animal you're trying to keep alive is some white dude named Jake. I didn't need to prove that this game was 100% set in Suriname. I just had to make sure that there was nothing in the game that proved that it wasn't set in Suriname. So I got googling. Are there isolated tribes in Suriname? Yes. Are there jaguars in Suriname? Yes. Is there gold mining in Suriname? Yes. And so on and so forth. I also picked up every piece of paper, trawled through all the lore, all the backstory. Was there anything that would discount this country as a location? I kept expecting to find something that would dash my dreams and ruin my plan. But I played through the whole game and found nothing. Okay, so the game probably is set in Brazil, as it's a Brazilian pharmaceutical company that's funded our research trip here. And the backstory talks a lot about Brazil, with medicine being handed out, and then a plague happening. But still, that doesn't mean this game is set in Brazil. The company could easily just be funding my research just over the border, in Suriname. So yeah, I was quite happy with this one. Now, none of you in the comments spoil this for me and say, well, actually, if you look here, rah, rah, rah. I don't want to hear it. This game is absolutely terrifying. Seriously, it's so stressful. It does a really good job of portraying what it would actually be like to be stuck in the Amazon rainforest. You would die. It is by far the best depiction of the jungle we've seen so far. Absolutely full of wildlife. Not all of it friendly. If you encounter a jaguar, you're screwed. It's very intense if you struggle to keep alive. You're constantly being bitten by leeches, or getting rashes from brushing up against the wrong type of plant, or stepping in an ant's nest. Not only do you have to keep yourself fed and watered, you need to make sure you're getting a balanced diet, as you forage for different types of food. Also, there's an insanity meter, which you have to be aware of, otherwise you start to see stuff that isn't there. I got very lucky whilst playing this game, and seemed to accidentally myself to all the places I needed to be, to find the equipment I needed, to get the hell out of the rainforest. There was a lot to take in with this game in terms of survival, and it was very daunting at first, and the controls were quite irritating, but if you're a fan of survival games, and up for a challenge, I'd recommend this one. So that just leaves little old Guyana. My plan for this one was simple. Seeing how Mercenaries 2 Walden Flames is swept across the whole of Venezuela, if I headed to the eastern edge of the map and crossed the border, then I'd be in Guyana. So off I went, just past Angel Falls, and flew as far east as I could. The screen started to flicker with static and interference as I exited the playable area. And there I was, Guyana. Now obviously in the game we're not supposed to be here, so all we see is a big treeless void, which is the exact opposite of what you'll see in the real life Guyana. So pretty poor representation, but obviously I was never actually supposed to be here. So this method wasn't exactly ideal, but in my mind that was definitely a pass. But now we're left with a slight problem. I'm only allowed to use each game once. So if Mercenaries 2 has now been used for Guyana, it means I can't use it for Venezuela. So, what other game is set in Venezuela? Well, well, well. Look who's back to save the day. Call of Duty Ghosts is a game that takes place across large parts of South America, including Brazil, Chile, and Venezuela. Call of Duty was bored of having the Russians and the Germans as the bad guys, and decided, South America, you're the bad guys now. It's the near future, and the whole of South and Central America have banded together into a massive army called the Federation, and with the help from some orbital strike weaponry, absolutely obliterate parts of the United States. We play as one of the Ghosts, a special forces unit, who go around completing various missions and possible acts of terrorism to try and bring down the Federation and its leader. There are 2 missions that take place in Caracas. I'm going to ignore the second one, called Federation Day, as obviously this game is set in a different timeline, and the Caracas we see in this mission is very different to the one you'll see in real life. But seeing as the previous mission, called Legends Never Die, is set during a flashback, it gives us more of a realistic representation of Caracas. The city is full of rather generic looking, blocky, high-rise buildings, and that's what we see in the game. I couldn't spot any of the landmarks we saw in Mercenaries 2, but we get a pretty good look at the National Pantheon of Venezuela, this tall and very beautiful church. Just like we see in the game, the city really is surrounded by tall, steep green hills covered in trees. But this giant looming dam is completely fictional, and for damn good reason, as the game expertly demonstrates. Damn, this set piece is so cool. No wonder Caracas in the next mission looks completely different. It literally gets completely washed away. I think Call of Duty Ghosts is one of the most underrated out there. The campaign is everything a Call of Duty campaign should be. Action-packed and full of massive set pieces, like the one we just saw. Each mission feels distinctively different, as we make our way through a huge variety of different locations. From mountains to desert to jungle, underwater and even outer space. It's a shame they never continued this part of the Call of Duty franchise. I think that's mostly because Ubisoft sued them for using the word ghosts. Spoiled sports. So there we have it. Every country in South America visited. Sure, it was way less countries than Europe, but still it proved challenging, and I think it's a solid list. And I'm more happy this time with my solutions to visit the last 3 countries. We're not done yet. Seeing how we're in the neighbourhood, let's go visit Antarctica. Now, obviously, I'm not an idiot. I know this is a separate continent. It's not part of South America. It just makes more sense to do it in this video, rather than giving its own separate video where I just literally visit one place. That would be dumb. Antarctica is the coldest, driest and windiest continent, with no permanent inhabitants. It really is the last true wilderness on planet Earth, and certainly the most hostile place you can visit, which makes it the perfect setting for a video game. Call of Duty's even been here, twice. My pick for a game set in Antarctica is one I've already mentioned, SSX. This is a very fun and surprisingly varied snowboarding game. It takes you to every single continent on Earth, including Antarctica. Sure, I'm pretty sure the ecologists and environmentalists would have a lot to say about you snowboarding over the pristine wilderness of Antarctica. But that doesn't stop these adrenaline junkies. The game takes place on Mount Slaughter, which is a real mountain that exists in Antarctica, probably chosen purely for its name alone. That is such a metal name for a mountain. It doesn't really feel like we're snowboarding down a mountain, as the slopes we descend are more like icy canyons or crevasses. They feel appropriately wild and dangerous, although the landscape and ice formations probably have been greatly exaggerated. The only signs of civilization we see are abandoned ships and buildings right on the coast. This is actually pretty accurate, as the coast of Antarctica is littered with abandoned settlements like this. Mostly old whaling stations, which have been long left to ruin to protect these beautiful creatures. Antarctica feels appropriately cold and deadly. The game has these things called deadly descents, each one with its own unique challenge, and for Antarctica, the challenge is the sheer cold. It makes for an interesting and unique challenge, as you have to stay out of the shade. Spend too long in the shadow, and your character's core temperature will drop, and you'll freeze to death, which can lead to some terrifying and stressful moments if you find yourself going through an ice cave. It may be quite exaggerated, but I think this is a very appropriate and very cool representation of this isolated and deadly continent. I really do enjoy this game. It's not quite as wacky or over the top as the earlier entries in the series, but I love the sheer amount of variety in this game. It makes it very replayable, and a lot of fun as you make your way around various mountains all over the world. And there we have it, the true ending of the video. South America and Antarctica ticked off my list. Where to next? Should I complete the Americas and head north? Or Asia, Africa, Oceania? If you enjoyed this video, do all that good stuff, like, share, comment, subscribe. And I really hope you've noticed an improvement in the quality of my channel. I've bought a new laptop, new recording device, and tried out a more professional editing software. And I hope it shows. I'm Foolish Pedro, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.